Here's something I never told Julian Ashford. Not in 15 years of friendship, not at the airport, not in any of the 400 and some letters I wrote him that I only ever sent half of. I have been in love with him since I was 14 years old, and I have gotten extremely good at making that look like something else. It isn't hard when you've practiced. You learn the right amount of casual to put into your voice. You learn to laugh at the right beat, so the laugh covers the half second where your face might have shown something. You learn to be the friend who's always there, because always there reads as loyalty and not as the alternative, which is that you simply can't make yourself leave. My sister Inez is the only person who's ever called it what it is. "You're doing the thing again," she says that same evening, watching me restock the syrup bottles with more force than restocking syrup bottles requires. The thing where Julian Ashford exists within 40 feet of you, and you turn into a Victorian widow guarding a locket. I don't own a locket. "You own a mug," she says, and I freeze. Because I never told her about the mug. Not really. Not the why of it. And the way she says it tells me she's known for longer than I realized. "Theo, he's getting engaged in 19 days. I'm aware. Are you going to do anything about that? Or are you going to make him a beautiful latte every morning until the wedding and call that emotional honesty?" I don't answer her, because there isn't an answer that doesn't make me sound exactly as pathetic as I currently feel. And Inez, to her credit, doesn't push it. She just bumps her shoulder against mine, the way she's done since we were kids, and says, "I'm not trying to be cruel, I just don't want to watch you do the disappearing thing again. You did it when he left. I don't want to watch you do it while he's still standing right in front of you." That night I go home, and I take out the box. I don't open it often. It lives on the top shelf of my closet, behind winter coats I never wear, and inside it is every unsent letter, every photograph from before he left, a movie ticket from the last film we ever saw together, and, at the bottom, the folded square of paper I wrote the night before his flight and never gave him. I don't reread it. I know what it says. I wrote it at 2 in the morning with the kind of honesty that only exists at 2 in the morning, and it said things like, "I think I've loved you since we were 14, and I don't know how to stop, and I don't think I want to. And if you don't come back the same, I will love whoever you become instead." And I remember folding it 12 times until it was small, enough to disappear into my palm, and then I remember not giving it to him because his flight was boarding, and because some terrors are easier to survive than others, and the terror of him reading it and looking at me differently felt, at the time, larger than the terror of never saying it at all. I was wrong about that. I know now, but knowing it 19 days before his engagement doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like a door closing in a very specific, very final way. I put the box back. I don't cry. Exactly, I've trained that out of myself too. Somewhere over the last 3 years, the way you train out anything that doesn't serve the performance. But I lie there a long time with the light off, listening to the house settle, thinking about the way he turned that coffee mug in his hands like he was trying to find an answer in it that wasn't there. Margot Delacroix is not, as it turns out, an easy person to dislike, which is its own particular kind of cruelty. I meet her properly 3 days later when she comes into the shop with Julian, and I watch them walk in together, his hand at the small of her back, in a gesture that looks practiced rather than instinctive, like something he's been coached into rather than something his body does on its own. And I brace myself for whatever I'm supposed to feel. And what I feel instead is complicated, in a way I wasn't prepared for. She's warm, genuinely warm, in the way some people just are, unfussed and direct. And when Julian introduces us, she shakes my hand and says, "Oh, the Theo. Julian talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you, and there's no performance in it, no territorial edge. Nothing I could point to and say there, that's the enemy. That's the cruelty of it. There isn't an enemy here. There's just a kind woman who has been told this marriage matters, and a man who has agreed to it the way you agree to weather, and a whole family structure leaning its weight on both of them, and somewhere underneath all of it, me, holding a coffee order and trying to keep my hands from shaking. He talks about you too, I say, which is true, and which cost me more than it should to say out loud. She orders something complicated with oat milk. Julian orders the same thing he always orders, and when I hand it to him, our fingers brush over the cup, and neither of us says anything about it. But I see him notice. I see the half-second flicker where his eyes come up to mine and something passes between us that has no name yet. Or rather has a name we are both pretending not to know. Margot excuses herself to take a phone call. Work, she says, apologetic. I'm so sorry, give me 1 second. And it's just the two of us at the counter, the way it used to be, except now there's a stranger's coat draped over the third stool that didn't used to exist. She's nice, I say, because it's true, and because I don't trust myself to say anything closer to what I actually feel. She is, Julian agrees, and there's a beat where he looks like he might say more, and then his older brother Cal appears in the doorway, tall, sharp-suited, the kind of presence that fills a room by simply deciding to, and the moment closes like a door, someone else shut from the other side. There you are, Cal says to Julian, not unkindly, but with the particular weight of a man checking an item off a schedule. Father wants the seating chart finalized by Friday, and Margot's parents are asking about the ring again. I'm aware, Julian says, and something flat enters his voice, something I recognize because I've heard it before, at his father's dinner table when we were teenagers, the exact tone he used when he was being told who to be rather than asked who he was. Cal claps him on the shoulder. Friendly, final, the gesture of a man closing a deal rather than greeting a brother. 1918. Nowadays, Jules, Father's been waiting a long time for this family to look the way it's supposed to look. Don't go soft on me. He leaves. Margot returns, apologetic, charming, and the three of us talk for another 10 minutes about nothing in particular. And the whole time I watch Julian's hands, the way they've gone, still around his cup, the way stillness used to mean something different in him before he learned to do it on command. When they leave, he glances back once, just before the door swings shut, and it isn't a long look, it's barely anything at all. It is somehow the loudest thing that happens to me all week. I don't see him again for 4 days. And in those 4 days I do the thing I've always done, the thing Inez calls the disappearing act. Except this time there's nowhere to disappear to, because he's not 3,000 miles away in a country I can't reach him from. He's 12 minutes away at his father's house, finalizing a seating chart for his own engagement party. On the 5th day he comes in alone, late, after close, and knocks on the glass instead of using the door, the way he used to when we were 16, and he'd show up at odd hours, because his house had gotten too loud with whatever his father and Cal were arguing about that week. I let him in. I don't ask why he's here. Some habits don't need 15 years to feel exactly the same as they used to. Can I sit? He says. Not really a question, and folds himself onto the same stool he sat on the first day. And I make him the coffee he always orders without being asked. And for a while neither of us says anything, and I let the silence be what it is instead of rushing to fill it. Cal had me try on the suit today, he says finally, for the announcement. Standing there in a room full of mirrors, while a tailor pinned things to my shoulders, and Cal stood behind me telling me to stand up straighter. This is important. Father's watching how this looks. He stops, looks down at his hands. I kept thinking about basic training, how they'd line us up in front of mirrors, too. Different uniform. Same feeling, I don't say anything right away. I let it sit there between us, the way you let a held note finish, ringing before you speak over it. You don't have to do it the way he wants, I say eventually, carefully, choosing the words like they're something breakable. The wedding, I mean. You could. Could what? He says, and it isn't sharp, just tired, the particular tiredness of a man who has run out of versions of this argument with himself. Tell my father. No. Tell Cal the merger he spent 2 years building falls apart because I changed my mind about my own engagement 3 weeks before it's announced. You don't know what it's been like since I got back, Theo. Everyone's already decided what this is supposed to look like. What about what you want it to look like? He looks at me then, Really looks the kind of look that used to undo me at 14, and apparently still does at 26. And for a second, I think he's going to say something that changes the shape of the room. Instead, he says, quieter, I don't really know anymore. I used to know exactly what I wanted. Before I left, a pause, longer than the others. There were things I wanted to come home and say. I didn't get to. My pulse does something unfair in my throat. What things? He almost answers. I watch it almost happen. His mouth opens. Something gathers behind his eyes. And then the bell over the door goes off, and it's Margot, breathless, smiling, holding up her phone. Sorry to interrupt. Julian, your dad's been calling. The caterer needs the final head count tonight, can you? And just like that, the moment folds itself away, careful and complete, like something put back in a drawer before anyone can see what it actually was. Coming, Julian says, standing, and to me, quieter. Almost an apology. I'll see you around, Theo. Yeah, I say around. He leaves with her, and through the window I watch them walk to the car together. Her hand finding his arm, easy and familiar, in the way that comes from people who've spent real time building a life shape together, even if neither of them chose the architecture. And I stand there a long time after the car pulls away, holding the chipped blue mug, thinking about the things he almost said, and about how 18 days suddenly feels like nothing at all. Inez finds me on the back step of the shop at closing, sitting in the dark because I haven't bothered with the light, and she doesn't ask what's wrong. She just sits down next to me, hands me half her sandwich without being asked, and waits. He almost said something. I tell her eventually before Cal walked in. There were things he wanted to say when he got back from deployment, and he almost told me what they were. And then, the moment just closed again. What do you think he wanted to say? I don't let myself guess. It's safer that way. That's not an answer, Theo. That's a defense mechanism wearing an answer's clothes. She bumps her shoulder into mine. You've been guessing about that boy since you were 14. Don't start being careful now. It's bad timing. I almost laugh. 18 days isn't exactly a lot of room for not careful. No, she agrees. It's not. So maybe don't waste it being careful. She's quiet a moment, picking at the crust of her sandwich. You know what I think? I think you've spent so long being the safe, steady, always their friend that you trained yourself out of being the person who says things. And I get why. God, I get why. Watching you write him those letters for 3 years and never send half of them nearly killed me. But Theo, he's not getting on a plane this time. He's getting married. There's a difference in how much time you actually have. I don't say anything. The dark settles around us, comfortable and a little sad, the kind of dark that asks nothing of you. I'm not saying ruin his engagement party, she adds. I'm saying don't let this be another box in the closet, that's all. The 17-day mark arrives the way deadlines always do, quietly. On a Tuesday, disguised as an ordinary morning, till you check the calendar and feel the ground shift slightly under what used to be solid footing. Julian comes in with Cal this time, which is new, and the air in the shop changes the second they walk in together. Cal's presence has a gravitational pull, the kind that rearranges a room around whatever he's decided the room is for. Theo, Cal says, friendly enough, shaking my hand like we're closing a business deal rather than ordering coffee. Good to see the old neighborhood's still got its fixtures. Julian's told me you two go way back. Way back. I agree. Good. Good. That's good for him. Having old friends around during all this, he says it like a compliment. But there's an undertone to it, something proprietary. The sense of a man inventorying the assets that support his project. He's been a little distracted this week, cold feet, I'd guess. Big change, but he'll settle. Always does. Julian doesn't react to being talked about like furniture, which somehow bothers me more than if he had. Margot's family wants the announcement moved up 2 days. Cal continues, talking to Julian now, business voice fully engaged. Her mother's flying in early. We'll do the ring presentation right at the top, Instead of after dinner, more impact, gets it locked in before anyone's had too much wine and started asking questions. The last word comes with a glance. Brief, deliberate. My direction, and I understand, with sudden clarity, that Cal Ashford knows exactly what I am to his brother, or at least suspects it, and has decided to manage me the same way he manages caterers and seating charts, as a variable to be controlled. 16 days, then, Julian says flat. 16 days. Cal confirms like it's good news, like it's a countdown to something worth celebrating rather than a door closing in slow motion. Father's already talking about it like it's settled. You know how much this matters to him, Jules? The Delacroix name attached to ours changes everything for the company. For how this town sees us after everything that happened with Mother's accounts. He says it lightly, but it lands like an old wound being pressed on purpose. You're not just marrying a woman, you're fixing something. Don't lose sight of that. Julian's jaw tightens. He doesn't argue. I watch him not argue. And it costs me something to watch. The particular pain of seeing someone you love get smaller in real time to fit a shape someone else built for them. When Cal steps outside to take a call, it's just us again. For 30 seconds, no more. He's not wrong, Julian says quietly, not looking at me. After Mom's accounts went under after everything with the company, this isn't just my engagement, Theo. It's the only good thing my father's had to hold on to in 2 years. That doesn't mean it has to be at the cost of... I stop myself. At the cost of what? He says, and his eyes come up, steady, waiting. Like he actually wants the end of that sentence. Like some part of him has been waiting for someone to finish it for him. Cal comes back in. The sentence stays unfinished. The bell on the door rings as they leave, and it sounds, for just a second, like something closing rather than opening. There is a version of this story where I say the sentence. I think about it, constantly turning it over the way Julian turns his coffee mug, looking for the angle that makes it survivable. At the cost of you marrying someone you were told to marry instead of someone you'd choose. At the cost of me standing here the same way I've been standing here for 15 years, waiting for a moment that keeps almost arriving and then doesn't. I don't say it, not that day. Instead, I do something almost as frightening, in its own smaller way. I ask him to come over. Like old times, I say when he picks up the phone, keeping my voice light, keeping it exactly the shade of casual that has protected me for a decade. Inez is making her terrible lasagna. You're contractually obligated to suffer through it with me. It's tradition. He laughs, really laughs, the unchanged laugh, and says, God, I forgot how bad that lasagna is. And something in his voice sounds, for just a second, like a person remembering they're allowed to want small, easy things. He comes. It's almost like before. The three of us around the table, Inez roasting both of us equally. Julian telling a story about a fellow soldier who'd never seen snow until basic training and cried the first time it fell, all of us laughing. Until it hurts in the good way, the rare way, the way that makes a kitchen feel like the safest room in the world. Later, after Inez excuses herself with a look at me that says, Don't waste this, it's just the two of us on the back step. The same step I sat on in the dark with my sister days before, except now the dark has him in it instead. I missed this, Julian says, looking out at nothing in particular. Not just you, this easy. Nobody managing anything. Nobody watching how it looks. He turns to me, and a porch light catches something open in his face. Unguarded in a way Cal's presence never allows. I missed you most, though, if I'm being honest. I thought about this, exactly this, sitting somewhere quiet with you, not performing anything. More than I probably should have. Over there, my heart is doing something enormous and reckless in my chest. Julian! I kept the mug, he says suddenly, like it surfaces before he can stop it. The blue one, the chipped one, you gave me before I left. I carried it through 3 different postings. I don't know why I'm telling you that. I know exactly why. I think he might know too. The air between us goes very still. The particular silence that exists right before two people either close a distance or step back from it, and his hand finds mine on the step between us. Just barely. Just the backs of our fingers touching, neither of us moving away. And then his phone lights up on the step beside him. Margot's name. A photo of the venue, lit for evening, captioned with 3 exclamation points. He pulls his hand back. Not unkindly. Just back. I should go, he says, and the openness from 30 seconds ago folds itself closed again, careful, complete, like a door someone remembers to shut. Yeah, I say you should. He pauses at the gate. Theo, what I was going to say earlier, before Cal came in, my whole body goes still, waiting. It's nothing, he says, and the lie sits between us, enormous and entirely too late to take back. Forget it, I'll see you at the gala. He leaves. I sit on the step a long time, holding the place on my hand where his fingers were, and I think 14 days. And the number feels, for the first time, like something closing instead of something counting down to a future I might survive. Inez finds me the next morning, making the same drink 4 times, because I kept forgetting to add the espresso, and she gently takes the cup out of my hands and makes it herself. He almost told you, she says. Not a question. He pulled back. He pulled back because his phone lit up with the woman he's supposed to marry in 2 weeks, Theo. Not because he doesn't feel it. Those are different things. Are they? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like a man choosing what's easy. Nothing about this is easy for him, she says, gentle rather than scoring a point. This isn't him choosing Margot over you. This is him drowning in an expectation nobody ever gave him permission to refuse. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. But it might mean the ending isn't written yet. Don't confuse him being scared with him being decided. That evening Margot comes in alone, no Julian, no Cal, just her, sitting at the counter with the particular stillness of someone who has been carrying something and finally needs to set it down. Can I ask you something? She says. After I bring her tea, she didn't quite order but clearly needed. And I need you to actually answer me. Okay, does Julian love me? The question lands in my chest like something dropped from a height. I think about lying. But there's something in her face, open, brave, already half-knowing, that makes lying feel like the crueler option. I think he cares about you. I say carefully, genuinely. I don't think he's pretending that part. That's not what I asked. I don't answer right away. She watches me not answer, and something in her expression settles, like a question she already suspected the shape of finally being confirmed. I've known for a while, she says quietly. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. I told myself it was old friendship. It's not that, is it? Margot, I'm not angry, she says. And remarkably, she isn't. There's something almost relieved in her voice. I agreed to this because it mattered to my family too. The merger, the whole architecture of it. I like Julian. I do. But I don't think either of us actually chose this for ourselves, and I'm exhausted pretending I haven't noticed he's been somewhere else this whole time, even sitting across from me. She finishes her tea at the door. She turns back. 13 days, she says not unkindly. If there's something true here, Theo, I'd rather know now than stand up in front of 300 people and find out later, do something about it. For both our sakes, she leaves. I stand there holding her empty cup, and for the first time in this entire impossible stretch of days, the deadline doesn't feel like a wall closing in. It feels very faintly, like a door someone just quietly unlatched. I don't tell him right away. I spend 2 days writing the sentence in my head, 100 different ways, the way I used to write those letters, except this time I am determined to actually send it. I find him on the 11th day, at the old bridge outside town, where we used to ride our bikes as kids, because he texts me out of nowhere, Can you meet me? I need to not be at the house for an hour. And something in the wording makes me drop everything and go. He's leaning on the railing when I get there, looking down at the water the way he used to, when we were 16 and something at home had gotten too loud to sit inside of. Hey, I say, coming to stand beside him, close enough that our arms almost touch. Hey, he doesn't look at me yet. Sorry, I just needed air. Cal had the photographer come today for the engagement portraits, and I stood there for 2 hours, smiling at a camera next to a woman who deserves a husband who actually chose her, and I just needed to not be there anymore. You could tell her that? I say carefully. What you just told me? I know. He finally looks over, and there's something exhausted and raw in his face, stripped of all the performance Cal requires of him. Theo, I have to tell you something, and I need you to let me say all of it before you say anything back, because if you interrupt me, I don't think I'll finish. My heart goes very still. Okay. The night before I left 3 years ago, at the airport, he breathes in slow, like he's been holding this exact breath for 3 years, and finally letting it go. I almost told you something. I had it ready. I'd practiced it in my head so many times, it didn't even feel like words anymore. It just felt like something I needed to physically get out of my body before I got on that plane. And then they called my flight, and I panicked, and I hugged you instead, and I told myself I'd say it when I came back, because surely there'd be time, surely it would still be true. Julian, let me finish. His voice shakes. Just slightly. Just enough that I hear 3 years of carrying something land in it. I loved you. I love you. I think I've loved you since I was 14 years old and didn't have a word big enough for it yet, and I spent 3 years overseas turning that chipped blue mug over in my hands every single night like it was the only proof I had that home was still real, that you were still real. That the version of my life where I got to say this out loud might still exist when I got back. The water moves below us. Somewhere a car passes on the road behind. I hear all of it and none of it, because the only thing in the entire world right now is the sound of him finally saying the thing I have waited 15 years to hear. And then I came home. He continues quieter now. And there was already a wedding waiting for me, and a brother who needed me to be the answer to a problem he'd already solved on paper, and a father who looked at me for the first time in 2 years like I'd done something right. And I didn't know how to tear all of that down to say the thing I actually came home to say. I still don't know how. But I can't marry her, Theo. Not when every single day I'm standing next to her. I'm thinking of you. I don't say anything for a long moment, because the moment is too large for words to move through quickly, and because some things deserve the full weight of silence before they're answered. Then I say, I kept the letters. What? The ones I wrote you, the ones I never sent. There's a box of them in my closet, going back 3 years. And the last one, the one from the night before you left, says almost exactly what you just said to me, except I never had the courage to hand it over before your flight boarded. His breath catches audibly. Theo, I love you too, I say, and it comes out simpler than I ever imagined it would, after 15 years of complicated rehearsal. I have for a very long time. I just got very, very good at making it look like something else for a moment. Standing on that bridge, 11 days from a wedding that suddenly has the structural integrity of wet paper. It feels like everything is about to be simple. Like the hardest part is already behind us. It is not. Here is the false resolution, and here is exactly how it breaks. Julian decides he has to tell Margot himself, before anything else happens, before he lets himself have a single hour of what he wants, without first being honest about what he's taking it from. I respect this. I tell him I respect this. What I don't expect is for Cal to find out before Margot does. It happens because Julian, gathering the courage to do the right thing, makes the mistake of telling his father, first thinking wrongly, that if Walter hears it from his son directly, calmly, there might be room for grace. There is no room for grace. Walter tells Cal within the hour, and Cal arrives at my coffee shop at closing, alone, controlled in the particular way that's more frightening than shouting would be. You understand what you're doing, Cal says. Not a question, standing in the doorway like he owns the air in the room. This isn't just Julian's life you're rearranging, Theo. It's my father's health, after everything with the company. The man had a heart episode 18 months ago. Did Julian tell you that it's Margot's family's trust, which took 2 years to build? It's the only stable thing my brother has built since he got back from a war zone. And you're asking him to set it on fire because of something that happened when you were both 14 and too young to know any better. That's not fair, I say, and my voice is steadier than I feel. Fair has nothing to do with it. I'm asking you as someone who's known this family his whole life. Let him do the right thing, the responsible thing. You'll survive it. You've survived 3 years of him being gone already. What's a little longer? It's not the same, I say. And you know it's not the same. Cal looks at me for a long moment, and something flickers behind the control. Something almost like grief. Almost like a man defending a structure he built, because the structure is the only thing currently holding his family together. He's all I have left that isn't falling apart, Theo. Forgive me for fighting to keep one thing standing. He leaves. I stand there a long time, and for the first time since the bridge, the 11 days don't feel like a countdown to something good. They feel, again, like a wall. That night, Julian doesn't call. The next day, he doesn't call either. On the third day, 9 days before the gala, I hear from Inez, who heard from someone at the bakery, who heard from Margot's cousin, that the engagement announcement has been moved up again, that Julian has gone quiet at his father's house, that nobody has seen him leave in 2 days. The false resolution is over. The thing that looked like peace has cracked, exactly the way these things do. Not with a single dramatic blow, but with silence, with a brother's grief weaponized into guilt, with a man who finally said the truest thing he's ever said, retreating back into the structure that's always told him truth is too expensive to afford. I don't chase him. I want to. Every instinct I have screams to drive to that house and stand outside it until he comes out. Instead, I do the harder thing, the thing that costs more. I wait, and I trust that the version of him who stood on that bridge and finally said it out loud is still in there somewhere, even if right now he's drowning. He comes to me on the 6th day, not the way I expect. It's late, past closing, and instead of knocking on the glass the way he used to, he just sits down on the curb outside, in the rain, like he's forgotten he's allowed to ask to come in. I find him there when I'm locking up, soaked through, staring at nothing, and something about the sight of him. Julian Ashford, who survived deployment, who carries himself like stillness is armor, sitting defeated in the rain, outside my shop undoes something in my chest that I didn't know was still tightly wound. Hey, I say quietly, crouching down to his level. I told her, he says, not looking up. Margot! Today! Properly, not through my father, not secondhand. I drove to her place and I told her everything. And she cried, but not the way I expected. She said she already knew. She said she's relieved, actually, underneath all of it. She said she's been waiting for one of us to be brave enough to say it out loud. Julian, my father hasn't spoken to me in 6 days. Cal told me I'm choosing, his word, choosing to dismantle everything he's spent 2 years building like I'm doing this to hurt them, rather than because I can't keep living a life that isn't mine. His voice breaks, just slightly, just enough. I don't know how to hold both of those things, Theo. Loving you and losing them. I don't know how to make this not cost what it's costing. I sit down next to him on the wet curb, not caring about my clothes, close enough that our shoulders touch. You don't have to know how to hold both yet, I say. You just have to decide which one you're not willing to lose for good. The rest, your father, Cal, all of it, that might take time. Time isn't the same as never. But if you walk away from this, right now from us, that's the one door that actually closes for good. I think you already know that. I think that's why you're sitting in the rain instead of going home." He's quiet a long moment, rain running down the side of his face. And when he finally looks at me, there's something different in his eyes than there's been this entire 11, now 5-day stretch. Not certainty. Something steadier than certainty. Something more like a decision that has finally stopped asking for permission. "I'm not calling off the gala," he says. My stomach drops just for a second before he continues. "I'm going to the gala. And I'm going to stand up in front of my father, in front of Cal, in front of everyone who came expecting an announcement, and I'm going to make one, just not the one they're expecting." He reaches over and his hand finds mine on the wet pavement, fingers lacing through fingers, the way they almost did on the back step before a phone screen interrupted everything. "I'm done letting other people write the ending to my life, Theo. I want to say it where it counts, where everyone has to actually hear it. That's either the bravest thing you've ever done, I say, or the most terrifying." "Maybe both," he says, and for the first time in this entire impossible stretch, he smiles, really smiles, the unchanged smile, the one thing 3 years and 1 war didn't touch. "Will you come to the gala? You're really asking me that." "I'm asking you to be there. When I finally finish the sentence, I started at that airport 3 years ago. I think about the box in my closet. I think about every letter I never sent, every version of myself that disappeared rather than risk being seen wanting this. I think about Inez saying, 'Don't let this be another box in the closet,' and Margot saying, 'Do something about it,' for both our sakes. And I understand, sitting in the rain with his hand in mine, that I have spent 15 years being careful, and that careful has never once made me happy, only safe, and those were never actually the same thing. Yes, I say, I'll come. 5 days disappear faster than I expect them to." Calls Ines, of all people, 2 days before the gala, asking, quietly, without his father's knowledge, whether I'll actually show up, whether this is real or whether his brother has lost his mind under pressure. Inez tells him, in her own words, that his brother found something most people never get the courage to find at all, and that Cal might want to consider whether the structure he's spent 2 years protecting was ever actually built to hold a person, or just an arrangement. Cal doesn't call back, but he doesn't try to stop the gala either, and somehow that silence feels like the smallest, most reluctant kind of grace. The night of the gala, I stand outside the venue, in a suit I bought specifically for this, my hands doing the thing Julian's hands do when neither of us knows what to say, turning something over, except I don't have a coffee mug. I have nothing. Just empty air and a racing heart, and I almost turn around twice before I make myself walk through the doors. Inside, it's exactly the kind of room Cal would build. Lights low and flattering, a band playing something tasteful, 300 people in expensive clothes holding glasses of champagne they don't yet know will go untouched in the next 10 minutes. I find a place near the back, half hidden, and I watch Julian across the room in a suit of his own, standing near his father, near Cal, near the small velvet box Cal has undoubtedly placed in his pocket, assuming it will be used exactly as planned. Margot finds me before the speeches start. She's wearing green, and there's something lighter in her face than I've ever seen on her, like a weight finally set down. "He told me you were coming," she says. "I'm glad. Somebody in that family should get the ending they actually wanted. Thank you," I say, "for everything. For asking the question that day. I don't think I would have found the courage without it." "I just hate watching brave people be quiet," she says, squeezing my arm once before melting back into the crowd, toward her own family, her own future, whatever shape it takes from here. And I feel, watching her go, something like gratitude so large, it's almost its own kind of love. The band stops. Walter Ashford steps up to a small podium, clears his throat, begins the kind of speech men like him have practiced their whole lives to give. About family, about legacy, about the joining of two names into something larger than either alone. And I watch Julian's face the entire time, Watch the stillness in him, the trained, careful soldier's stillness. And I think, this is it. This is the moment everything either holds or breaks. And so, Walter says, gesturing for Julian to step forward. It's my honor to formally. Dad, Julian says, quiet but absolutely clear. The kind of clear that cuts through a room full of small talk and clinking glasses without needing to be loud. I need to say something first. Before the announcement, if that's all right, the room goes very, very quiet. I watch him take a breath. The same breath I imagine he took at the airport 3 years ago, the one that didn't make it out in time, and this time it does. 3 years ago, the night before I deployed, Julian says. Looking out at the room, at his father, at Cal's frozen, careful expression, I almost told someone something at the airport. I didn't say it. I told myself there'd be time later. I spent 3 years overseas carrying a chipped coffee mug through 4 different postings, because it was the only proof I had that the life I wanted to come back to was still real, still waiting. A murmur moves through the crowd, uncertain, not yet understanding. I came home and found out a wedding had already been planned for me. To someone wonderful, genuinely Margot, I mean that. But a wedding that was never actually mine to choose, the same way most of my life since I got back hasn't felt like mine to choose. And I let that happen, for a while, because it was easier than tearing down something everyone else needed me to build. His eyes find mine across the room, and for a second the entire crowd disappears, 300 people reduced to background noise. But I'm done being careful with the one true thing I've ever known about myself. I love Theodore Whitfield. I have since I was 14 years old, and I would rather stand here and lose every single thing I'm supposed to protect than spend one more day pretending that isn't true. The silence that follows is enormous. The kind of silence Cal would call a disaster, and I would call simply the sound of a held breath finally being let go. Walter's face does something complicated, shock, then something older and harder to name, something that might, given years, soften into understanding. Cal doesn't move at all, frozen at the edge of the stage, the velvet box still useless in his pocket. And then, from somewhere in the crowd, Margot starts clapping. Just her, alone, deliberate, refusing to let the silence calcify into shame, and after one terrifying, endless second, a few others join her, not everyone, not even most, but enough, and the sound spreads through the room unevenly, imperfectly, the way real grace always does. Julian doesn't wait for permission. He walks straight off the small stage, through the parting crowd, until he's standing in front of me, breathing hard, eyes bright. That was either the bravest thing I've ever done, he says, echoing my own words back at me from the curb, or the stupidest. Maybe both, I say, and I'm laughing, and possibly crying, the two feelings too tangled to separate anymore. He reaches up and straightens the collar of my suit, a small, unnecessary gesture, the exact kind of thing his hands do when there's too much feeling and not enough room in his chest for words alone. And then his hand drifts up to my face instead, his thumb brushing my cheekbone, and he says, quiet enough that it's only for me. I should have said it at the airport. You're saying it now, I say. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. He kisses me, there in the middle of a room full of 300 people who came expecting a different ending entirely. And it isn't dramatic or rushed. It's slow, certain, the kind of kiss that has been waiting 15 years to happen and finally has nowhere left to wait. Somewhere behind us I hear Inez's voice cut through the murmuring crowd, delighted, unbothered by decorum. Finally, and even through the kiss, I can feel Julian smiling. We don't stay for the rest of the gala. There isn't really a version of that room that has space for both Julian's announcement and Walter's original plans, and Julian, for the first time in longer than I think he can remember, chooses to walk away from a room rather than stand in it managing how it looks. We end up back at my place, the lights low, both of us still half-dressed in formal wear that suddenly feels absurd, sitting on my kitchen floor because neither of us has the energy to make it to a couch. My father's going to need time, Julian says, leaning his head back against the cabinet. Cal might need longer. I don't know what happens to the company, or the merger, or any of it. I don't know what the next 6 months look like, Theo. And that terrifies me more than the deployment ever did. I know, I say, I'm not going to pretend that part away. I just know I'd rather face all of that not knowing, with you, than have known exactly how my life would go, and not had you in it. He turns his head to look at me, and there's the openness again. The one Cal's presence used to close like a door, except now there's nothing left to close it. Show me the letters, the ones you never sent. I want to read every single one. They're embarrassing, I warn him. 14-year-old me had a lot of feelings and very little restraint about metaphors. Show me anyway. I get the box down from the closet. We sit on my kitchen floor and I hand him letter after letter, watching his face as he reads each one. Watching 3 years of his own carried silence meet 3 years of mine, finally in the same room, finally not waiting for an airport gate to close around them. At the bottom of the box is the last letter, the one from the night before he left, folded 12 times until it was small enough to disappear into my palm. I hand it to him without saying anything. He unfolds it carefully, like it might still be fragile after all this time, and reads it slowly. I think I've loved you since we were 14, and I don't know how to stop, and I don't think I want to. If you don't come back the same, I will love whoever you become instead. And when he looks up, his eyes are wet, and he doesn't try to hide it, which is its own kind of small miracle. A man who learned to keep his face still for a living, finally letting it show everything. You wrote this before I even left, he says. And you never. I was scared, I say simply. For 15 years I was scared. Tonight you weren't. Tonight I figured something out, he says, folding the letter back along its old creases. Careful, deliberate. I figured out that the only thing actually worth being brave for was already standing right in front of me the whole time. I just had to stop letting other people write my life long enough to notice. He sets the letter down on the kitchen floor between us and reaches for the chipped blue mug sitting on my counter. Its twin. The one that's lived in this kitchen for 3 years, untouched, waiting, and fills it with water from the tap, just to have something to hold. The way his hands always need something to hold when the feeling gets too large for empty air. To new endings, he says, lifting it slightly. The chip in its rim, catching the kitchen light. To finishing the sentence, I say, and he laughs, and I kiss him again. Slower this time, no crowd, no countdown, no deadline ticking down to anything, except whatever comes next, which for the first time in 15 years is something I actually get to help write. 6 months later, the company survives, restructured, smaller but standing. Cal, it turns out, is better at rebuilding than he ever was at controlling, and something in him softens once the thing he was protecting stops needing protection from the truth. Walter still hasn't said much, but he came to dinner last month, sat at our table, ate Inez's terrible lasagna without complaint, and called Julian by his first name instead of a list of expectations, which is, for a man like Walter Ashford, its own kind of apology. Margot married someone else this spring, a marine biologist named Felix, who makes her laugh the way Julian never quite did, and she sent us an invitation with a note in the corner that said simply, "Thank you for the brave thing. Hope you got your ending too." We did. Tonight, Julian and I are at the same bridge outside town, the one where he finally set it after 3 years of carrying it overseas, and he's quiet beside me, looking down at the water the way he's always done when something is gathering in his chest. "What?" I say, nudging him. "Nothing. Everything." He turns to me, and the porch light openness from that rainy curb is just his regular face now. Unguarded, easy, the way it should have always been allowed to be. I keep thinking about the airport. How close I came to never saying it. How if I'd boarded that flight without trying, I might have spent the rest of my life thinking I imagined the whole thing. You. This. Us. Just because I never tested whether it was real. You tested it, I say, eventually. Eventually, he agrees and reaches into his jacket pocket, and what comes out is not, as I half expect for one wild racing second, a ring. It's smaller than that, plainer. And it takes me a moment to recognize it. A fragment of chipped ceramic, sanded smooth at the edges, threaded onto a simple cord. A piece of the original mug, the one I gave him before he left, the one that finally, inevitably broke last month when he dropped it, reaching for his phone at 2 in the morning, and which I assumed was simply gone. I kept the piece, he says. The one with the chip. The one that made it that mug instead of any other mug. I had it made into this, because I figured. The most important thing this mug ever did wasn't holding coffee. It was being the proof I needed that you were real, that home was real. The whole time I was gone. He loops it gently over my head, settles it against my chest, and his hand stays there a second longer than necessary, just resting over where the chipped piece sits against my heartbeat. I don't want a ring yet. I want this first. I want you to carry the same proof I carried, so you know. However far either of us ever has to go, this is what's waiting. Not a question, a fact. I close my hand around the smooth ceramic fragment the same way he once closed his hand around a coffee mug across an ocean, and I think about the airport, about the boxes in my closet, about every version of myself that disappeared, rather than risk being seen wanting exactly this. And I think finally, with nothing careful left in it at all. Yes, that is exactly right. We walk back toward town together, his hand finding mine the way it always eventually does. And for the first time since I was 14 years old, I don't look back at anything I'm leaving behind. There's nothing left back there I need. Everything I was ever waiting for is walking right beside me.